You are familiar with Michael Jackson's name and face. But when do you think his solo career started? Well, it started long before Off the Wall. His solo brand built a multi-million-dollar empire during the Jackson 5 era. The Motown years were clearly an elementary and middle business school. You know, the Jackson 5 signed their 2.8% royalty deal with Motown in 1969 and made history with 4 back-to-back #1 hits. But for Berry Gordy, he saw dollar signs in Michael Jackson, becoming a brand in himself. That was to launch Michael Jackson's solo career, the rise. Therefore, as you can see by now, in October 1971, Motown Records executed a calculated brand extension with the release of Michael Jackson's debut solo single, Got to Be There. While the public saw a soulful 11-year-old, Berry Gordy saw a diversified revenue stream designed to bypass the overhead of a 5-member group. In actual fact, Michael Jackson, in private, was a 13-year-old boy, and this is such a pivotal age. Just look back at your own life when you were 13. This was the launch of a pilot program within a corporate monopoly. By early 1972, the single had peaked at #4 on the Billboard Hot 100, and the debut album of the same name was released. However, the financial architecture behind this success was heavily skewed toward the house. Under the 1969 Motown contract, the Jackson 5 and Michael, as a solo act, received a royalty rate of only 2.8%. To put that in perspective, for every dollar of retail sales, the group split less than 3 cents. As Michael's solo brand scaled, the work volume was industrial. In 1972 alone, he released 2 solo albums, Got to Be There and Ben. The title track, Ben, became his first solo #1, selling over 1 million copies. Yet, the economics of performing were where the true business school lessons occurred. During the early 70s, the Jackson 5 were grossing roughly $50,000 to $100,000 per night for live performances. However, after Motown's commission, travel expenses, and the split between 5 brothers, Michael's individual take-home pay was a fraction of the gross. Despite generating millions for the label, the brothers were famously kept on a weekly allowance of $500 to $1,000 during their peak years, a strategic move by Berry Gordy and their father, Joe Jackson, to maintain financial control. Especially Berry Gordy, as he owns Motown. The solo start was a masterclass in market saturation. In 1973, Michael released Music and Me, and in 1975, Forever, Michael. By this point, the Jackson 5 had moved over 60 million records globally for Motown. Estimating a conservative $5 retail price per LP, they had generated $300 million in gross revenue. Yet, due to the 2.8% rate and the lack of publishing ownership, the brothers were financially stifled. Michael realized the Motown system was a gilded cage. He was a global lead generator for a company that owned his name, his image, and his masters. The real education happened in both the boardroom and the booth. Michael watched as Berry Gordy leveraged the J5 brand to secure a $0.1 million signing bonus. Michael had already internalized the most important lesson of the Motown years. In a high-stakes economy, the talent is the asset, but the owner of the infrastructure keeps the profit. He wasn't just leaving a label. He was preparing to build his own sovereign empire. But that's not all. As you know, Michael often questioned, have you seen his childhood? So, without a doubt, there are untold stories about the challenges he faced, on how he truly built his solo career that led to a multi-million-dollar empire during his Jackson 5 era. So let's reveal the secrets. On the challenges he faced. The challenges, as you can almost picture it, a 13-year-old boy going through adolescence. Yet he has to keep up with the appearance of being 2 years younger. So in 1971, the primary challenge wasn't talent, it was asset partitioning. While the public saw a carefree child, the internal reality was a double-shift labor model. Michael was required to maintain the Jackson 5's grueling tour schedule, grossing upwards of $100,000 per stadium date, while simultaneously clocking 10-hour solo recording sessions. This was the extraction of maximum value from a 13-year-old before the voice break risk could devalue the inventory. The corporate machine was effectively front-loading his career, treating his childhood as a depreciating asset. Michael Jackson was just 12 to 13 years old. While it was a year of massive commercial success for the Jackson 5, It brought specific professional and personal challenges that began to shape the rest of his life. Therefore, the primary challenges he faced during this period include: 1. The beginning of a fractured childhood. By 1971, Jacksonmania was at its peak. The group was traveling on grueling national tours, filming television specials, and launching a Saturday morning animated cartoon. For Michael, this intense schedule meant the complete loss of a normal childhood. He later recalled this era as a deeply lonely time when his life was restricted to recording studios, hotel rooms, and concert stages, entirely isolated from peers his own age. 2. High-pressure family dynamics. Under the strict management of their father, Joe Jackson, the brothers faced intense pressure to remain perfect. Michael later revealed that his father would discipline him and his brothers during rehearsals, frequently holding a belt to punish any missed steps or vocal mistakes. Because Michael was the youngest and the focal point of the group, the emotional weight of keeping the act flawless fell heavily on him. 3. Facing a decline in group momentum. After making history by hitting #1 with their first 4 singles, the Jackson 5 faced their first taste of slowing chart momentum in 1971. Their singles that year, like Mama's Pearl and Never Can Say Goodbye, were massive hits but peaked at #2. Subsequent releases later in the year began placing lower in the top 20, creating early pressure from Motown Records to find new ways to sustain their explosive popularity. 4. The transition to a solo career. In October 1971, Motown released Michael's first ever solo single, Got to Be There. While successful, pulling double duty as both the frontman of a touring band and a standalone solo artist added a double layer of expectations and work onto a young teenager. The creative trap. In 1971, the group also began to feel the limitations of the Motown hit-making machine. Berry Gordy and Motown executives maintained absolute control over the songs the brothers recorded, refusing to let them write or produce their own music, a restriction that would eventually cause the group to leave the label. A look at the Jackson 5 performing on television in 1971 showcases the immense stage presence and polished talent Michael maintained, masking the behind-the-scenes pressures of their grueling schedule and intense rehearsals. In 1971, the Jackson 5 operated as one of the highest-grossing live entertainment properties in the world, generating millions of dollars through a grueling national tour where a single arena date could gross over $100,000, equivalent to over $750,000 today, with tickets priced around $5.50 to $7. This massive live drawing power was multiplied by primetime television payouts from their ABC special Going Back to Indiana and an animated Saturday morning cartoon series. Yet, due to a heavily lopsided 1968 contract, Motown Records absorbed the vast majority of these profits, binding the group to a meager 2.7% to 2.8% royalty rate on record sales. Consequently, even as their 1971 singles Mama's Pearl and Never Can Say Goodbye dominated the charts, the actual financial payout trickling down to the young performers was heavily restricted, with the bulk of their earnings funneled through the Motown machine and their manager father, Joe Jackson. This operational challenge and financial disconnect peaked in October 1971 when Motown launched Michael as a standalone solo artist with his debut single, Got to Be There. The track became an instant commercial powerhouse, selling more than 750,000 copies in its first 3 weeks alone and laying the foundation for a solo album that would eventually clear over 3.2 million units globally. This created an intense business paradox. A 13-year-old child was suddenly generating 2 entirely separate, multi-million-dollar revenue streams for Motown as both a solo force and the frontman of a touring band. Despite driving an international Jacksonmania retail and music empire, Michael possessed zero creative control and faced an extreme imbalance between his astronomical market value and his actual financial payout, establishing the severe economic friction that would eventually force the family to break their contract later in the decade. The 1972 release of Ben became the ultimate proof of concept for his solo brand. The single hit #1 and sold over 1 million units, grossing an estimated $2 million in retail sales for the single alone. However, this success created a political crisis within the family firm. The The brand was shifting toward Michael Jackson and his brothers, creating a leadership vacuum within the group's infrastructure. Financially, 1971 exposed the reality of the Gilded cage. Despite generating millions for Motown, the family's move into their Encino estate, Havenhurst, was funded by a $140,000 advance from the label. Because this purchase was held as a debt against their future royalties, the family remained effectively indentured to Berry Gordy's ledger even as global superstars. The systemic challenge was a total creative embargo. Motown's strict assembly line ecosystem, governed by its ruthless quality control department, treated Michael like an asset to be managed, forbidding him from writing his own lyrics or selecting his own producers. By 1973, this deficit of creative equity triggered a severe market downer. While Motown successfully pushed the Jackson 5 group into the emerging funk market with hits like Dancing Machine, they trapped Michael's solo career in a holding pattern of outdated, formulaic ballads. The result was a commercial collapse. With the release of the Music and Me album, Michael's solo momentum stalled, and his lead single, With a Child's Heart, cratered at number 50 on the Billboard charts, a devastating drop for an artist who had just scored a #1 hit with Ben. The untold story here is the ownership gap. Every hour Michael spent in the booth built Motown's publishing catalog, not his own. He was earning a $500 weekly allowance, while his likeness generated an estimated $15 million in annual merchandising revenue. He was the face of a global franchise, but he was financially deleveraged. He realized the 2.8% royalty rate wasn't just a number, it was a financial ceiling. To build a multi-million-dollar empire, he didn't just need a better voice, he needed a better contract. The Motown years weren't a career, they were a high-stakes internship in a system that was designed to keep him in debt. So, each of these challenges, even though he may have been too young to realize, you can feel that inevitably, there are turning points from these challenges. The turning points. You can feel a sudden shift, when even you have turning points in your life and career. So, for Michael Jackson, the period between 1971 and 1975 was a psychological and financial crucible for Michael Jackson. While the public saw a wildly successful child prodigy behind the scenes, an intense struggle for financial autonomy and creative control was brewing. At just 13 to 17 years old, Michael was managing 2 full-time careers simultaneously, fronting the Jackson 5 and building a solo portfolio, while operating under one of the most restrictive record deals in modern music history. In 1971, the dual identity launched that on October 7, 1971, Motown released Michael's debut solo single, Got to Be There. It was a deliberate strategic move by Motown chief Berry Gordy to hedge his bets on Jackson 5's collective longevity by positioning Michael as a standalone asset. However, the financial reality was grim. The baseline Jackson-Motown contract was notoriously unfavorable, with the group splitting a meager 2.7% to 2.8% royalty rate on retail record sales. For Michael's solo work, the rate remained heavily suppressed. Furthermore, Motown routinely deducted production costs, session musicians, and promotional expenses from these royalties before the Jackson family saw a dime. At age 13, Michael was forced into a grueling psychological split. He had to remain a team player within his family unit while carrying the weight of being a corporate financial engine. In 1972, peak solo validation and the Ben anomaly, Michael released Got to Be There and Ben. The title track, Ben, a ballad for a movie about a killer rat, became his first solo #1 single. While Got to Be There was certified gold, selling over 500,000 units in the US, the take-home pay was an insult to the talent. In 1972, a standard vinyl LP retailed for roughly $4.98 to $5.98. While these releases generated millions of dollars in gross revenue for Motown, Michael's share amounted to less than a penny per record sold after corporate deductions. This success proved he could command the global stage alone, yet he was still a vessel for the corporation's ideas, generating immense wealth he couldn't personally access. Between 1973 and 1974, the creative drought and financial awakening. The turn came when the Motown machine began to stall. Michael's third album, Music and Me, in 1973, bombed commercially, peaking at a dismal number 92. As sales plummeted, the financial squeeze tightened. Because Motown's contract structured recording costs as advances recoupable against the artist's minor royalty share, lower sales meant Michael was actively losing financial ground. He began to closely observe how Berry Gordy managed the copyrights of the empire, realizing that without ownership, he was effectively a high-value employee rather than an artist. In 1975, the break in the $50 million legal war, the final turning point arrived in 1975. Recognizing that Motown was stagnant, the Jackson family, pushed by a maturing 17-year-old Michael, secretly negotiated a defection to Epic Records, CBS. The Epic deal was a financial revolution, offering a 10x higher royalty rate, moving toward 20%, and, crucially, creative autonomy over publishing rights. Motown retaliated with a massive $50 million breach of contract lawsuit, freezing assets and seizing the trademark to the name, the Jackson 5. Sitting at the Encino kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, Michael did the math. His share of Motown's millions amounted to fragments of a cent. Choosing to defect required standing up to Berry Gordy, the most powerful man in the industry. This psychological trauma and financial exploitation directly forged the hyper-shrewd businessman, which we will get into much later. As for now, it is the Motown years to truly focus on. So you can see that it was a school for him. Even his brothers have said in many interviews that being at Motown was like a school for them. This is further evidence that if Michael Jackson's brothers saw Motown that way, how do you think Michael saw Motown? Therefore, it is clear there were strategic steps put in place, whether intentionally or unintentionally. The strategies, the forensic blueprint of the Motown years. As you know, you can either forget what you learn in school, or you can remember and learn to apply when necessary. Therefore, the Motown School was not just about music, it was a high-stakes education in financial exploitation. To understand how Michael Jackson built a multi-million-dollar empire during his era at Motown, you have to look at the raw data of his solo career between 1971 and 1975, a period defined by massive gross revenue and microscopic personal profit. Phase 1, the solo launch and the Ben anomaly between 1971 and 1972. Michael's solo brand reached a fever pitch with the single Ben. It sold over 1 million copies, grossing over $1 million in retail revenue. But here is the forensic reality. Because Michael didn't write the song, he received $0 in publishing royalties. Under the family's 1968 contract, the royalty rate was fixed at a meager 2.7% of wholesale. After corporate deductions and family splits, Michael's personal take-home pay for a worldwide #1 hit was less than $1,500. This created a severe rich-broke paradox. Michael was a global celebrity who had to ask his father for a $5 weekly allowance to buy a comic book. This taught him early that fame without financial control is a hollow asset. Phase 2, the unrecouped trap between 1973 and 1974. By 1973, the market was shifting. Michael's solo albums Music and Me and Forever, Michael tanked commercially. Because Motown structured recording costs as advances, Michael fell into the unrecouped trap. He actually owed Motown money for his studio time. To bridge this financial gap, the strategy shifted to pure physical labor. The family signed a residency at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas for $100,000 per week. For a 15-year-old Michael, this meant performing 2 live shows a night, 6 nights a week. While he was generating millions in merchandising, lunchboxes, posters, and magazines, Motown retained 90% of the licensing fees. He was the face of a global retail machine, but he was effectively an indentured laborer. Phase 3, the $50 million exit. By 1975, the Jacksons had generated an estimated $30 million from Motown, yet the family's net assets were worth less than $1 million. The final strategy was a corporate separation. Michael and Joe secretly negotiated a deal with Epic Records that offered a 10x higher royalty rate, moving toward 20%, and, crucially, 100% of his mechanical songwriting publishing. When they announced their exit, Berry Gordy retaliated with a $50 million lawsuit. To escape, Michael had to forfeit the name, the Jackson 5, and leave his solo master recordings behind. Losing his intellectual property and watching his brother Jermaine stay at Motown for a corporate contract shattered Michael's remaining innocence. He realized that the executives who owned the copyrights held the power. This trauma rewired his brain. He stopped viewing himself as a performer and started viewing himself as a corporate entity. These are just some of the strategic lessons. But just like in your life and career, when you sit back and take a deeper look, you will find that there are other lessons you learn and you grow in the process. Which means the Motown era reveals a cold truth about high-level ambition. Talent is a commodity, but ownership is a monopoly. Michael Jackson's solo career from 1971 to 1975 was a masterclass in corporate leverage, and the lessons he learned during this financial disenfranchisement became the foundation for his future billion-dollar empire. Because you don't get to the level of success without learning fundamental lessons. 1. The brand within a brand strategy between 1971 and 1972. At just 13 years old, Michael launched his solo career while remaining the engine of the Jackson 5. This was a deliberate strategic move by Berry Gordy to maximize market share, but was still marketed as 2 years younger for maximum appeal. The power dynamic. While Michael was marketed as a solo star, he had zero creative control. This reveals a vital lesson in human behavior. Early-stage independence is often just a subsidiary expansion of a parent corporation. The money principle, by 1972, got to be there, and Ben had generated over $9,400,000 in gross retail revenue. Yet, Motown demonstrated how to extract multiple revenue streams from a single core asset without doubling their talent costs. Michael learned that in a corporate system, identity is fluid and dictated entirely by market demand. He may not have known at the time, but you can clearly see that after certain points, being a lead singer of a group and having a break away for a short while was not a rat move. It was a mousetrap that caught Berry Gordy making as much cheese, aka money, from his prized asset. 2. The vulnerability of the single product line. By 1973, with the release of Music and Me, Michael learned the danger of decision-making within a distracted corporation. As Motown shifted its focus to Hollywood filmmaking, Michael's brand suffered. The royalties trap. Sales dropped to under $2,500,000, and because of the recoupable costs in his contract, Michael's personal solo earnings for this period were estimated at less than $100,000 despite the millions he had already generated. The strategic lesson: high sales do not equal high net worth if you do not own the masters. Michael realized he was an employee generating millions for a corporation while receiving a flat, heavily deducted salary. Relying on a single platform or distributor to champion your brand leaves you vulnerable to their internal shifts. It also pays to stay listening to your parents, because this foresight was not seen until later from himself to understand. It was from his father. 3. The ceiling of corporate machinery. In 1975, the final Motown solo album for Michael Jackson, Forever, Michael proved that when your growth outpaces a system's willingness to adapt, staying guarantees stagnation. Ambition versus the glass ceiling. Despite generating over $30 million in total revenue for the label since 1969, the Jacksons were trapped by a restrictive contract. The power of no. This creative stifling led to the ultimate power move, walking away from the historic brand that built them. By defecting to Epic Records, they secured a 20% royalty rate, more than triple their Motown rate, and the creative freedom that Berry Gordy's assembly line model refused to provide. The bottom line: Michael Jackson's Motown solo career was defined by the pain of exploitation. Watching Motown retain the rights to his image, his music, and even his group's name, the Jackson 5, deeply traumatized his business sensibilities. This period of being asset poor while being fame rich is exactly what fueled his obsessive ambition. He realized that the executives who owned the copyrights held all the power. This realization transformed him from a laborer into a landlord, setting the stage for him to truly become, in every sense of the word, the king of pop. With all that said, what are the lessons you take from this to apply to your own life and career? Before you make that decision, let's take a deep recap. The financialized erosion of innocence is so sad that you feel sorry for a little boy who joined the group when he was 5 and hasn't stopped working. It's like you can see how his innocence was taken, his childhood ripped away. The tragedy of the Motown years wasn't just a low royalty rate. It was the invisible isolation of a child who was the center of the world, yet completely alone. To understand Michael Jackson, you have to look at how the golden cage was reinforced with every million US dollars he generated for someone else. Between 1971 and 1972, the paradox of the Rat movie. There is a profound, tragic irony in this peak. At 13, Michael was singing Ben, a ballad about a lonely boy befriending a killer rat. While the single sold over 1 million units and the albums generated over $10 million US dollars in retail gross, Michael was channeling his own agonizing isolation into those lyrics. He had no friends his own age. His childhood was entirely replaced by the relentless mechanics of the studio. The boy wonder was generating a fortune in US dollars for the label, yet he would look out of hotel windows at children playing in parks and weep because he couldn't join them. In 1973, the puberty panic, as Music and Me stalled on the charts, the emotional tension shifted from isolation to terror. Michael's crystalline soprano voice began to crack. For a boy whose entire self-worth and family survival were tied to a specific sound, puberty wasn't a rite of passage, it was a financial threat. This was the year he realized that when his solo revenue plummeted to under $2 million US dollars in retail value, the support of the corporation vanished with the money. He learned that in the music business, your value as a human is only as stable as your last batch of US dollars. But how can you challenge against nature when the very record label that signed you lied about your age? Plus, self-identity in terms of looks is another challenge to deal with. Will people stick to recognizing you as you grow older in looks and height? In 1974, the mask of perfection, the emotional weight was visible. Battling severe acne that shattered his self-esteem, Michael was working an adult's graveyard shift at the MGM Grand to earn $100,000 US dollars per week for the family enterprise. He was a teenager essentially paying off the family's unrecouped debts to Motown with his own physical exhaustion. The stage was no longer a playground. It was a shield he used to hide his fracturing identity while he generated the US dollars required to keep the Havenhurst Encino estate running. In 1975, the artistic rebellion. The triumph of 1975 was a declaration of personhood. On Forever, Michael, you can hear the birth of his adult sound. When he finally stood up to Berry Gordy, it was an emotional great escape from a system that had generated over $30 million US dollars off his family's labor while leaving them with less than $1 million US dollars in net assets. He walked away from his masters and his group name, proving he valued his future autonomy more than any amount of Motown's US dollars. The ultimate irony is Michael Jackson's solo career built his brand, but also his family's empire. He may have loved the art of artistic expression, but it cost him hard lessons at the school of Motown. But Michael never took it personally. He actually showed Berry Gordy a lot of gratitude, but that was much later in his life because of the infamous Motown 25. Let's just say Michael Jackson's stubbornness paid off because Berry Gordy knew he owed Michael Jackson, because without him being happy-go-lucky accepting Berry Gordy's leadership to launch his solo career at a very young yet pivotal age, Michael Jackson's talents would have been locked in a cage like the rest of the Motown acts on a conveyor belt. The principle, the person you want to be, is understanding the true principle of how Michael Jackson built his solo career and career with his brothers, the Jackson 5, while growing in value as an asset for Motown and asset overall. Therefore, the Motown school of Michael Jackson's solo career offers more than just a history lesson. It provides a forensic blueprint for anyone, including yourself, navigating the modern economy. The core principle is this: immense talent and historic labor mean nothing if you do not own the infrastructure of your output. Between 1971 and 1972, the illusion of success. Michael Jackson was the most visible asset in the world. He generated over $10 million US dollars in retail gross for a system that controlled his image, his schedule, and even his age. The forensic reality is that Michael was fame-rich but asset-poor. This period teaches the leverage gap, the distance between the millions of US dollars you create for a corporation and the tiny fraction of US dollars you actually retain. If you don't own the fuel, you don't own the engine. 1973. The employee ceiling. Michael's solo revenue plummeted to under $2 million US dollars. Michael learned the employee's truth. Under Motown's rigid royalty structure, he realized that no matter how much value you've generated in the past, an individual acting strictly as an employee is always subject to the financial ceiling and creative whims of the owners. In the kingdom of business, the landlord always eats before the laborer, especially when the US dollars start to dry up. 1974, the sweat equity trap. Working for $100,000 US dollars per week in Las Vegas to pay off unrecouped debts, Michael experienced this sweat equity trap. He was generating massive amounts of US dollars through physical exhaustion just to keep the family enterprise afloat. He realized that laboring for a brand you don't own is simply a high-priced form of stagnation. 1975, the sovereign transition. Michael's great escape was a transition of equity. By leaving behind a system that had generated over $30 million US dollars off his labor, he proved he valued his future autonomy more than any amount of Motown's US dollars. He chose the speculative value of his own potential over the historical comfort of a brand that had outgrown its utility. The fundamental lesson is clear. Attention is the currency, but ownership is the wealth. If you do not own the masters of your life, your intellectual property, your data, or your time, you are always one executive decision away from being unrecouped. Michael Jackson's journey proves that to maximize your true economic worth, you must transition from a worker who provides a service to an owner who controls the equity. Once you learn how the game is rigged to capture the money you generate, you stop playing to participate, and you start playing to own the board. So,